Recording, and let me share my screen. I'll share Android Studio. Okay, if you guys can remember, last time we talked about a few things in terms of generating an application for iOS and Android, and there we use these a technology called KMM, Kotlin multi-module. It's one way of developing applications. We talk about the pros and cons in here. And if you guys can remember to fresh up your memory, we create the project called Legend, and we have an Android application, which is the generated code. Okay, it's okay. I did an update, that might be the case. Okay, let me get my other internet connection backed up. Not sure this one is. Okay, the internet connection is back online. Let me switch that. Okay, so in this small example, what we did was we created the Android application as well as the iOS application, and we had a little bit on where we share the code and how the structure of the Android application as well as the iOS application and platform as a whole is going to be laid out. It's not something like that you will see in a typical Android or iOS application, but it has its own way of putting everything together. Okay, so to build up the memory, so we have the Android application, and there is a section called the shared application, and there's a part called the iOS application. So these three sections containing the two native applications, and one section there will be find the shared code among the two platforms. So shared in the sense it has three parts as well. So the common main, iOS main, and Android main. So anything comes in common terms, we can put in common main module, and something to iOS specific, or if we want to implement this in iOS level, what we can use is the iOS main. And for anything that is for Android specific, we can go with the Android implementation. And we talked about a little bit about the build.gradle file, which comes on the application itself. So we have source sets. Okay, so there are three sections: common main, which is representation for, or which is the dependency section, or the configuration for this common main section, and common test section, which is for the testing part of this common module. And there is the Android main, which representing the Android main section over here, and we can extend the Android test sections over here. And there are some implementation for iOS main, which represent this section. And iOS main is basically composed of at least with this few section, iOS for x86, ARM64, and simulator ARM64 main. So these are like different iOS versions that we will be targeting on, but all those things become composed into iOS main application. So that's how it's scattered around the application framework. So if we need anything, okay, if it is something related to the common section, we can put it in here. If it is related to Android section, we will put it in here. So you can see that we are in a section where we gonna be doing a REST API call. So we will be using a client, or we can say a dependency. Like if you're using Android or iOS, we most probably in Android we'll be using something like Retrofit. Okay, but Retrofit only works perfectly, or works at least with Android projects as we know of. So what we need to do is we need to come across a library that supports in both iOS and Android, and they can be shared. The code can be shared. So obviously, the way we can do that is using a library that is shareable among these two platforms. So yeah, in that sense, we have libraries like Kto. So written in Kotlin, and make sure when you are writing applications using KMM, all the code that's gonna be there should be in Kotlin, and it should support Android and iOS as well. So if libraries are not supported in both platforms, it won't work. So we have to make sure the libraries that we're going to be using is KMM compatible. At least they support both iOS and Android. So for common things, we have put it in here, the Kto commands and everything. And but as you might know, Android implementation, it's going to be different. The client which Android is handling, it's not going to be compatible with Swift or Objective-C that we're going to be using in iOS. So we have to make sure we are using the correct library, correct type of library within Android. So we have to introduce this Kto client for Android. Okay. In this scenario, what will happen? This is like the common things, and this is the Android specific part. So anything that is not relative, that is not within the scope of Android, we'll be putting in the Android main section. So this client is going to be Android specific, so we're going to be putting it there. And the same goes for the iOS as well. So in iOS, you can see that Kto client for Darwin. Darwin is the code name for Mac or Apple operating systems. So Darwin is the code name that given for any Mac. Whether it is Apple, Mac OS, iOS, or something like that. As far as I know, Darwin is the code name for anything iOS or Apple centric. Okay, so we have introduced those things, and of course there can be Android specific thing, there can be iOS specific things, which at the beginning we don't need to like go into in that deep. That's because when we are developing, when we are coming to where we find, okay, there is some issue with it, then we can focus on that. But other than that, don't try to force yourself into like learning everything at one go. That will fail. By doing and by learning, you will understand more things in doing your stuff. Okay, right. Let's get started, and we'll continue with the REST API implementation. At least for now, we don't have any REST API implementation put in place, but we'll do add some things in our applications. So we have set up Kto, and what we'll be doing is we'll be creating something called I'll be using the exec API or exec what do you call the official documentation provided by KM in order to do the K2 things. But let's see what we get into troubles and what we need to do. So last time we added the dependencies, then what we need to do is we need to have the model in place. Okay, so model in the sense, as you all guys know, when we are calling some API, even with retrofit, if you guys can remember, we have something called the DAO or the serializer. So we need to create that serializer in this section as well. The only difference is it can be shared. So anything that creates with the Kato or with KMM, we try to share among the things in a good way. So for example, let's say for uh, we have an API, okay? The API representation, the data representation for both iOS and Android, it's going to be the same. Okay, let's say for example, we have a name. In iOS, we will be having that name, and in Android, we have the same thing. Okay, so we'll be duplicating code at least. I mean, without using KMM, obviously Swift will have its own definition. Objective-C, Kotlin will have its own definition. But when we are using that, we can put everything in Kotlin, and KMM will generate all the necessary things for iOS and Android differently. So we don't have to worry about it. So the API that we're going to be using is the SpaceX API, okay, and it has a endpoint called launches, which represent launches of the application. I think we have also created something called Rocket Launcher. Okay, so in that API, you will find something called flight number. You will find something called name, date UTC, and whether it is success or not. So these are like the plain old things that you will find in the REST API. Okay, in REST API, you will find flight number, name, and date UTC. So you guys can see we are using this annotation called serialize name. That means when we are getting the data from the REST API, the field is going to be flight underscore number. But as you guys know, we don't use underscore within Kotlin or Swift UI. We use the snake case. So what we can do is we can say, hey, there are going to be a field called flight underscore number, but we'll be modeling, we will be looking in our application called flight number like this. So we have a reference to flight number, flight underscore number within our Kotlin code as flight number with a capital N. Okay, so we do the modeling and we have things ready on. So we can add all the things, but for now we'll be looking at few things in here. Okay, and make sure these annotations are only available on Kotlin X serialization library. Okay, so if you guys wonder where it is not something coming out within the standard Kotlin, so you have to add the plugin, the Kotlin plugin serialization. Otherwise, the annotation might not come. So make sure you add the plugin as well. Now the next thing is what we have to do is we need to create a client. Okay, if you guys can remember, we had retrofit. We had the retrofit client. Likewise, we'll be creating something called the HTTP client, where we're going to be making the service calls and everything. So we'll be creating that in let me minimize this for now. Yeah, we have a class called greetings in here. Okay, for now we'll have the method as you can see in here, and we will introduce the HTTP client class. Okay, let me copy paste the code. Okay, and let me import. So control enter. This is all enter. Okay. Option enter. I'll import this stuff. JSON. import, it's gonna be K2 JSON, yeah, okay. This JSON is coming from serialization, as I can remember. Yes, coordinate serialization between true, ignore unknown keys, true, and yeah. So what we are doing is we'll be creating a client. Okay, this HTTP client is a configurable client that we can make the HTTP request. Okay, we'll go into this configuration later on. What it does and what are the things. Right now, these are the default configuration that we can be using, and we have our own HTTP client. Okay, so what we'll do is we will take we'll do a get request. Okay, we'll do a get request and get all the information related to the rocket launch. Okay, so what we can do is we will be um, we'll be using the greeting message that we've been using to show the message. We will customize this. Okay, let's do that first. And okay, let me copy paste some code in here. Okay, and there we go. HTTP client, oops. Let me put it in on the top so it makes more sense. Okay. HTTP client, yes, the client that we are having in here. I think we are not calling it correct. Let me comment that out. Okay, let's do this. Let's say HTTP client dot get. Okay, and under get, what we have to provide is the URL, right? Yes, the URI that we are using, it's going to be a string. And what is the URI that we are interested in? It's going to be the SpaceX API and version 4, and it will get the launches. And we can get the body. Okay, and we have to be we can be given the typings on this, but I'm not sure we will be doing that now. Okay, I have an idea. Okay, the next thing is exception handling. Let's do that first. Throw an exception. Yes, that might happen. What is the issues? Suspend function should be coroutine scope. Okay, the function should be suspended. Okay, that's the issue. So so we can see that when we call the get method, it is saying, okay, you can't just call this method. There is this get method which gives an error. So suspended function get should be called only from a coroutine or another suspend function. So that means if you guys can remember, when we are doing some sort of HTTP request, IO request, those things going to be blocking our main thread, or it's not going to be running in our UI threads. It will take time, so it need to be run on a different thread or maybe a different worker. So if you run this get method without suspension or without a coroutine scope, what will happen is the application might might break. Okay, so we have to make sure the suspend modifier is there, and so we know for sure that by using the suspend keyword, there's going to be an asynchronous call. Okay, asynchronous call, that means it will take some time, and while it is happening, do not block our UI. Wait until it's happened. So we annotate, or we just give some information about the function that we are calling in here, the HTTP GET. We obviously gonna say, okay, it will take some time. So don't please do anything stupid like waiting until this value is retrieved. If we go into network delay, or it will take some time than expected, wait a little bit, and we will continue work on it. Okay, so by using these suspend keywords, it's automatically hiding a lot of complexity that is going on the background. Okay, so what we can do is we have a list of rockets, which we get a list of rockets by simply calling this API. Let me try to get it into a one line. Okay, there you go, much better. So we have a list of rockets, and we can get the last successful launch. That means which one was the executed last. So we can get the last element of this array, sorry, in this list. So we can say rocket last, and we will evaluate this, and it launch success true. That means the last one, the last element within this list, we will take that, and we will check the launch successful equal to true or false. Okay, so you guys can see me, you guys can see that launch success is a boolean that we will get. We will extract this, we will unfold it, and we will say, okay, whether it was true or false. So the last successful launch is a variable which say, okay, it is true or false. And what we will do is we will do some modifications to our code. I will copy this code, and rather than just saying everything in plain old text, we don't have these days until New Year. What we'll do is we will add this. This is the text that we would like to see, and the last successful launch was on. We will say last successful launch, and successful date was the date that we are coming in. So in here we are filtering out whether it is true or not. If it is successful, we will get the last successful date, and we will put it in UTC. Okay, you guys can see that it is coming as a date UTC. That means whenever this is true, you might get a value over here, and the values, it contains the date which it was successful, and we will be showing the date right around here. Okay, let's give it a try, see whether it is working as expected. This is the device manager, don't need that, don't need that. Where's the emulator? Okay, there is an exception, compile logging error. What is the error? Main Java. Suspend function greeting should be called only from a coroutine or another coroutine. Okay. Suspend function. Should be working. Greetings. Do we calling the greeting function in here? Okay, rerun it again. Greeting should be on routine or another Java Kotlin leaks. Okay, in main activity. Perhaps I need to modify this as well. Let's see what are the options that we get. Surround with the widget. No. Probably I have to make this suspend. No, it does not help. Let's see what we can do. Main activity. Okay, okay. Sorry. Now what we have to do is that's simple, understandable. The reason behind this, it's a suspend function. Suspend function means is gonna be working with asynchronous stuff. That means it will take some time to launch. Okay, it is not going to be launching it's not going to give us a result as we going to invoke it. It will take some time. So what will happen when you are creating this, when you are modifying this, when you are calling this, okay, you can't show the greeting message at once. It is not possible at this moment. So what we need to do is we need to make sure, okay, show this greeting message right after we get the values from the API. Okay, we have to be careful. Okay, we won't get a direct greeting as we did earlier on. We will get it by a suspend function. So we will tell, okay, there are two things that we can do. We can do either run this method in a suspend function as we did on in here. Since the HTTP get is a suspend function, we have extended to this greeting method saying, okay, this is going to be suspend. This is all going to be a suspend function. But in here, you can't make this method suspend because it is going to be running on the on create. On create is something that we will be creating as the instance of as a lifecycle event in our application. So we can't make this suspend. So what we have to do is we have to make sure this is executed right after everything that we need from the API is gone through. So we had two options, right? If you guys can remember, suspend function, greeting should be called from a coroutine or another suspend function. So this one, another suspend function, it is not possible since we are on create. So we have to make this executable, or we have to execute this section in a coroutine. Okay, so make sure you have coroutine enables within your application, otherwise this will not work. Okay, so we have to make sure we um, in the Android app. Okay, we have to make sure we have installed the coroutine. Let's go into our build.cradle, make sure we have coroutine installed. Composer UI, material, yeah, everything is in here. Yeah, we both wait a second, let me guess whether we have to put it in Android app or the yeah. So since this is handling in our main activity, okay, so that's how we do it. I mean, at least get the logical point. So this is handled in the main activity. Okay, it's going to be something executed in the main. So anything that we executed in main, that means it is going to be handled somewhere around here. Okay, within this project. So the coroutine scope, what we need is going to be within the project itself. So we have to add coroutine in our application like this. Okay, so we have to make sure we have included coroutine. Okay, otherwise without coroutine you can't run the suspend function. Okay, let me sync up now, otherwise I won't be able to use coroutine functions and everything. So make sure you add coroutines in this scenario when we are getting this. And now what we have to do is we have to run this piece of code, run this, what do you call this greeting composable in a coroutine. So how are we going to do that? So we have something, I think I talked to you guys about coroutines at least in little bit scope. So we have something called launch LAU launch effect. Okay, launch effect, and we'll be calling true. Okay, bear with me. This code. Okay, and the scope of this true, and we will say we will have the coroutine scope in here. We can call something called remember launch effect. We will have the scope around here. Okay, remember coroutine scope. Import that, and we will have something called that would do as for now. What we can do is we can say scoped dot launch. Okay, this is where the coroutine magic happens. We will say try catch. Okay, in here we will say, okay, rather than running in somewhere else, run in the coroutine section. So we will have an exception if this fails. What will happen within the exception? So we have try and we have greetings. Okay, we just will just show whatever it needs to show. And what we will do is greeting. Okay, sorry, we need a text actually out of this. So this is not what we are expecting launched. And we can say in the effect, right after effect, we'll be saying greeting, this one, greeting. And we should pass some greeting around here. Let's just for now, we say hi. Okay, right. Let's see whether I have done something wrong first, whether the application should say hi right around now. Yes, it's showing hi. Now what we have to do is understand this piece of code. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to show this composable which accept a string, and that string is going to be shown in our UI. Okay, now with this section what we're going to be doing is we will get the greeting message we will get a greeting message, and we have to pass it for this greeting section. But if you guys can remember, this is a view this is a view that is that need to show something, but the text that we're going to pass, we need to commit from the API. Okay, so while the API is coming, we need to show something. Okay, so what we will do is we will create a variable around here, and we will put that variable in here, and we will use this remember mutable state import. Okay, so basically what we are doing is we are creating a text, okay, like this, and we'll be creating a remember view and mutable state of there are uh, two values, okay, mutable values and immutable values. Mutable values means we can change it over the time, but immutable values we can't change it. So what we will do is we will take the text, but initially we will have something called loading, and what we'll do is we will show upon that. But once the coroutine scope is done, once it is done executing, what we'll do is we will show the greeting message. Right now, let's see whether the loading message is showing as we have defined as a default value in here. So let's run it again. You can see it's showing loading as we expected. We did not get the greeting message out of it because we will get a greeting message, but we haven't assigned it to this text. While it since it is not assigned, it will be showing this mutable text loading as the beginning of this text. Okay, it's not changed right now. So what we need to do is, after this coroutine is executed, after this effect is executed, and everything is done perfectly, what we need to do is we need to give the values, give this value to the text value we are expecting. So we can say, okay, get the text and assign it to greetings. Okay, and if you run it again, and it's still say loading, and let's see, yep, nothing happens. So there can be two things. We can go to the what do you call, logcat, enable and show. Now, oops, I just restarted. Give me a second, guys. Let me share my screen again. Android Studio. Okay. Some reason logcat restarted. Give a couple of minutes to get this over with. Gradle update, not interested now. Let's run it once again within the emulator. Okay, it's still show loading, and yeah, and you guys can see there are no errors that we can find of, but there are a few errors with regarding the emulator package mine. Could not measure. There is something related to no such file directory. Okay, nothing related to ours. I mean, at least for the code itself. Okay, seems to be working fine with from here onwards. Host connection, Android emulator. Yep, it seems to be working fine. Nothing to worry about. These are like all warnings, nothing like an error. So we have done two things. Let's try like this. There is a try mechanism that we can take from both ends. Let me stop. Let me run it again. Okay. So what this is a handy way of doing that. Okay, we can I'll do this like this. So if we were successful, so in here we can say within the try block we can say greeting get message. So if it is successful, whatever the message that we are getting from greetings will be assigned to this text. Okay, so for some reason we were failing. Okay, for some reason we have failed to get the text. So what we can do is we can get the exception in here and we can put it in here. Okay, whatever the text that we are getting, for some reason if it is fails, in this case we did, and we will see the error message. Now you can see permission denied, missing internet permission. Of course, we did not allow internet permission because even though we are making one, but this way of coding uh, can be minimized. Okay, or we can say we can just make those two lines accessible, something like this. So whatever the message that we are getting, if it is greeting successful, it will be assigned to text. If it is error message, it will all be it is also going to be assigned to the type text. Okay, so when this happens, if it is successful, it will be assigned to text. If it is an error, it will be also assigned to text. So the problem is, obviously, when you are looking at this emulator, oops, there's the emulator, permission denied. Okay, so even though we are making the application itself, you guys can remember we need the permissions to be set up. So even though we the thing that we need to remember in here, we are creating a shared module, but everything applied for a normal project, it's going to be applied anyhow. So sorry, within the Android application, make sure we go to Android view, project view. If I go to Android view, Android app manifest, and you guys can clearly see we have not used permissions. Internet. So there you go. Make sure you have the internet permission, because since we are making a REST call, the permission should be there. Okay, I will go back to the project view. Unable to solve the host API SpaceX data, no address associated with the hostname. Okay, let's see why it is happening. So we are calling an API, api.spacedatax.com. Let me first check whether it is working correctly. We have the Android May. Okay, greeting message. SpaceX launches. Let me check. It's most of the time, if you are not using HTTPS, it will not work. But in this case, it is working. If you go to the URL, it is working as expected. But let's see why this comes again. We'll go through and unable to solve host. We'll Google search. Unable to solve host Android. Okay. No address associated in my emulator. Okay. Users permission internet. Manifest, did I? Wait a second, did I think I did something wrong in here? If I go to Android project, manifest. Okay, it should be one line. Users permission internet. Okay. Okay. Let's try it again. No. Still the issue is there. Sometimes of the Wi-Fi connection. Do I have Wi-Fi in here? Okay. You guys can see the network is unavailable for some reason. Maybe that is the case. Android Wi-Fi connected. Let's see. I'm not sure whether I have internet within this thing. Let me go to. Do I have a browser in here? Okay, I have a browser. I accept cookies. I don't know what I have accepted. Let's see. It is asking for a Google account. No thanks. I just want to see whether the internet is working or not. Okay, let me go to YouTube and see. Okay, internet seems to be okay right now. Okay. What I'll do is I will replay. Now it is showing loading. Okay, it was working as expected. The reason is being I was not connected to internet. So obviously you can't make a REST request. Okay, guess what? It is 33 Android. Android, we have reversed it. Android doing in reverse form. If you guys can remember in the greeting message, what we have done is, oops. If you guys can remember the platform name, we have reversed it. We can do that. We can, obviously, why not? The last successful launch was 2010 and whatever the number is, this. So if we go to the SpaceX API and if we go to launches, if you go to rockets, and I'm not sure. Yeah, there are like 27 items. I can't scroll everything. Yeah, it should be the date that we are getting right? It is showing some sort of date. So we can assume that it is working. So, but to make it simple, let me take the first launch so I can easily see that date UTC, or I can, you guys can see my Chrome, right? Let me share Chrome as well. New share, of course. I need Android Studio as well as Chrome. Okay, so this is the API that we are looking at. If you look at the first element, and you can see the date UTC is around 2006. Let's try to get that number. So rather than working on the last one, we will get the first one. Okay, that means we are getting the first element of the rocket launches, and we will try to refresh and see the timestamp is correct. Okay, it is showing me 2008. What do we have in here? It shows 2006. Weird. Did I miss something? Oh, by first, they are referring to the 0th element. Not sure. So we have flight number, local date, and date UTC 2006. It should be this. Let's get the flight number and see whether we are doing something wrong. Last launch, flight number, then we can get the number exactly. I'm not sure. Okay, last successful launch was for, oh, okay, and now I get the answer. So when we are filtering this out, okay, when we are filtering this out, we say rocket first, and what we do is we get a list of rockets, right? And we take the first rocket which launch successful was true. So if you look at the tables that we will see in here, let's see the launch successful. So I think successful is the keyword. If I am not mistaken, rocket launch. Yes, launch successful is mapped to success with what we are getting from the API. So if you look at the first one, the success is fails. Okay, so we are not taking the first as this one as the first. So the next one that we are saying is, was it a success? Let's see. Success, where's success? We don't need this, we don't need this. Success, yes, this one is also fails. So probably third one is also failed, but the fourth one has been successful. Okay, and the number for that it is going to be 4 for sure. Flight number, it is 4. So what we have done in here, we are not taking the first element itself. Okay, it's not the first element, but the first element where launch was successful. Okay, the first element where launch was successful, and if it was successful, what we will do is get the flight number in here. It is 4. Okay, so what we have done in here, to summarize again, so we are calling an API from here, and we are getting all the information that we are need by using this HTTP client. Okay, and we have the HTTP URL that we need to call, and once we call it, we get the body, and it's going to be a list of rocket launches. Okay, so we have serialized the rocket launches like this, so we don't have to do we can have object reference to that, and from that launches, what we will do is we will take the first rocket launch where it says the launch success is true. Okay, launch, we will not get the first element, but the first element where launch success was true. Okay, otherwise it won't work. So we get the last successful launch. It should be first successful launch. Okay, whatever you want to take, and then this is just naming. And we are taking the launch, and we are getting the flight number. Okay, so make sure this call is gonna do our data manipulation. Okay, whatever the data needed, we have separated in here, and we can get those data without an issue. Okay, so in a way, we have separated our repository in here. If you guys can remember the MVVM architecture, the data source is now one data source is different than the other one. Okay, we are not directly comparing the MVVM architecture in here, but you guys can clearly see there is a different layer which handle the rocket launches. Okay, so this is going to be a suspend function. The reason is behind it's going to be asynchronous. That means it will take some time to get the data and everything to be compiled into, and we can't wait until we don't know how much time it will take to make the network request, and how much time it will take to get us back. So we will be making it as a background task or something that will return after some times. Okay, we can't expect we can't say it is going to be 1 second, 2 seconds. We don't know the conditions. We don't know the whether it's going to be returning now or in 5 minutes. All right. So what we have done is we have suspend this function. That means it will give us values eventually. So we are calling this method. We are calling this greeting method from our from our Android side. What we'll do is we have to make this running in a earlier it was just getting the greeting and whatever the text we need. And right now we can't just directly call it. The directly call is not available because this greeting text is no longer a synchronous function. Now it is an asynchronous function because of the suspend keyword that we are using. So we have to make sure after it's execute, whatever the greeting message we are getting, we will be assigning it to variable called text. Okay, and it's a type of string, and we will populate the greeting with that string. Okay, if there is an error going on, what we'll do is we will get the error. If it is there, we will get the text. If it is not, we will just simply say error, and we will see it in here. So what will happen in here? The getting the greeting message is no longer a direct one, but asynchronous one. So asynchronous function either should run in a suspend function, but in here we can't make this function suspendable anymore because it's a lifecycle event. So what we have to do is we have to resolve this using a coroutine. So we have used something called this remember coroutine scope. That means this is the coroutine point. That this is how we execute a coroutine. We are running this in a default coroutine scope. And so by launching a coroutine scope, we will do these things in background. And once it is done, the text will be ready. And this launched effect is a composable function. That means it is like we are waiting on the things to get completed. So we have the coroutine scope within our graphs. So launch effect using the coroutine scope, and we are getting the message and we are assigning it to this text. Okay, so the scope is we use this remember coroutine scope to refer it once again, and this text, so it's going to be different. So for the initial state, we will be having the loading state, but right after we get a greeting or an error, it will be changed to whatever the text which these guys are written. So you don't need the return in statement in here because ultimately uh, it is not needed within the Kotlin language. Okay, so we will get the text, and with the help of that, we will get the text, the muted text we want to see, and there you go. It is showing around here. Yes. Okay. Any questions up until this, guys? So make sure when you are dealing with these things, the dependencies, where we have defined them, and what are the shared dependencies, what are the unique dependencies. We have to be really careful when we are doing such things. I even make the mess. Sometimes I put I have this notion like, okay, everything that is common, we should go to the common section or Android section, and I screwed up big time. So when you are using something related to Android application and UIs, make sure we add it in the Android project, or if anything related to iOS, we have to put it in there. So we haven't changed the iOS implementation of this right now because coroutine is not natively supported by what do you call Swift. Okay, Swift does not know about anything that we are referring in Android right now, but there are alternatives. There are ways that we can get rid of these things. At least we can get the similar implementation on Swift. But before we go into iOS, did you guys did you guys have any questions or anything that I need to clarify it once again? I'm happy to do that. Yes? No issues? Okay. Right, students. All right. So we basically changed the Android application. Now we have to do is look at the iOS implementation, how iOS is going to handle these things, how it's going to be affected on this section. Okay, so I will launch Xcode now. Okay. Yeah, attention. Is the text variable is like live data in view model. Okay. We have a question like this. So the text model, is it something like we have in view model? That means the text variable that we have defined. The straight answer is no, it is not. It is a variable that is coming on in this section. Actually, to put in point, we are actually not implementing full-fledged MVVM architecture right now. This is like what we have done in the starting of the application development. we had no MVVM architecture or something like that. We are just putting everything, gluing together and putting it in here. So no, the text that we are seeing in here, it is not something like live data. Live data in the sense, we need streams, okay, unidirectional stream. When we are talking about MVVM architecture, the value that we are supposed to get is it should be unidirectional. Okay, live data. What we should happen is the text is updated somewhere else. Now what you guys can see, it is assigned to here. Okay, we are not pushing the data, we are assigning. That's the main difference between if you guys can remember the architectural pattern. If we are assigning, you can clearly see that we are assigning something that we are getting from here. This is not coming from a reactive stream or something like that. We are just simply calling the function and we are assigning it here. We are waiting on we are running on a coroutine scope. That means we are running it in background, and once we get the value, we are directly assigning it to a text. Okay, but in an VVM architecture, we don't assign anything. We just stream it. The text should be coming from a stream. Right now, we are not using the MVVM architecture or live data or something like that. So it is not 100% something like that. This is like we are doing a simple MVVM. So no, this is not like live data, but we will get there. Okay, I'll just we'll just explore through more how we can make these observables, how we can make these things um, more MVVM friendly. Okay, this is not MVVM friendly at all. This is just me just assigning values where did I where I got from simple what do you call it? Simple coroutine. Okay, we are running a coroutine, getting a value and value assigning. So this is not live data. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what if we like var text loading? Yeah, sure. We can write that. So the problem here, the value that we want to do, var text, and if we say loading, what should happen? Loading. Okay, let's see how it goes. Let's run it again. It's loading, loading, still loading, still loading. Yeah. So nothing happens. Why is that? Okay. So there are things that we need to remember in here. They're like these keywords. Okay, these keywords have a different meaning on each. Okay, let's work one more time with each other. Okay, so we have we could have done something like this var text, and we say okay, this is going to be a loading one, and once the effect is completed, the loading text is going to be something the API response or whatever the error it comes with. Okay, that's pretty much yes. If I were to go with something like this, yes, I would definitely go with something like that. But the problem is it's related to compose. Okay, so when we are working with composable states, what I'm not sure whether you guys have followed the Flutter, the state management, like set state, and we can directly update the build method. I'm not sure whether you guys have followed it. I'm not sure. So there we had something called stateless widget and stateful widgets, that kind of thing, if you guys can remember. So state, to jog down your memory, the stateful widget contain the states. That means it is aware of its changes. But stateless widgets, if you assign something, it is not going to update even though we assign these values. Okay, so similar concepts going in here. Okay, we have this text, we have assigned it for loading, but we are not mentioning that this can be changed over time. But when it does, when it does, what you have to do is you have to re-render yourself. Okay, so if you assign the variable like this, what will happen is it's going to be a const. That means it's not going to have a state at all. It's going to be loading until some UI rendering task is completed. Maybe it might not change, it might not get updated. So we can't let that happen. We need to make sure, okay, this text that we are seeing here, it is mutable. Okay, that means it will change eventually. When it does, you have to update it yourself. Okay, so in here, what we are trying to do is we are saying, okay, this is a text which is going to be changed over time. For initial state, for initial value, let's keep loading. Okay, let's keep loading as the initial value. But remember, that means we are saying in any time this will change, anytime this text value is get assigned, like in here within the coroutine scope, make sure you re-render the component itself. Okay, if we do not if you assign something a static variable like this, what will happen is it will stay forever like this unless we are doing a rendering itself. But in this scenario, we don't have any other rendering scenes, and we can't assure that it's going to render soon. So what we are telling is this text will be mutable. Initially, it will have the loading, and it will be remembered. That means it will react to any changes in here. Like we have changes, it will react to any change, and it will re-render itself. Okay. Yes, the main the variables that we are putting in here, they don't have a state, kind of a state. It's not like the state that we are referring. It's not immutable. That means these values gonna be there, and but it's not gonna be evaluated unless we do a UI rendering ourselves. Okay, so the variable that we are defining here, yes, you can say like that it does not have a state, but when we assign them with these remember keyword and mutable states, what will happen is they have a state. So if you guys can remember the Flutter, this can be something in a what do you call a stateless widget. This can be something like that we will see in a stateful widget. So this will react to any change, but this will not react to anything. Okay, makes sense? Okay, nice. So having these values is expensive because why? Unless these are not changing, these are like listeners. Okay, so whenever we are changing, the UI gonna get rendered again. Okay, UI gonna get rendered again, but these are static const within the life cycles or like re-renderings. These things will not change. So these things are taking less memory, but these things will take more memory. But given the use case in here, we need to make it stateful. Okay. All right. Good questions. I mean, literally, we are paying attention to these details. That's nice. So if you guys can remember, in the beginning, I said Jetpack Compose, Flutter, and Swift UI, all are kind of like a same thing in different languages. Okay, it's the same concept that they are running
Stream, right?
Sorry,
The stream, right?
stream in the sense.
Stream in the sense like in the MVVM architecture, live data thing.
Okay.
So this is not as that,
No,
right?
no, no, no. No, this is not a stream. This is not a stream of data. This is like a local context. So this is a state within only this component. Okay. If you are going with streaming and all, it's going to be completely different architecture, like MVVM architecture. So this is not MVVM at all. We are just mutating everything in here. We don't have any separation of layers. Like in here, this main activity, we can consider it as the view. Okay, this is what we are seeing. But the logics, what it need to get, all the streamings, whatever the data that we need to manipulate, this is within this view. So it is violating the MVVM architecture. If you are going with MVVM architecture, anything related to fetching data, updating the view, there's none of these things can be applied in here. So we have to separate that. So if we are separate that and we follow the unidirectional patterns and we have VM section and everything in place, then we can consider as MVVM architecture. But this in a nutshell is just manipulating state at here and there. Okay, this is not MVVM at all. But a local state, a state which is manipulating this stuff is here. Okay, not streaming at all. Got it?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so we will see how we can apply MVVM in here. So if we correctly did MVVM architecture directly with the whatever the text that we are seeing in here, this is a composable activity. And if we have the MVVM separately and we have defined it correctly, the same view, the main activity can be written in XML, then we should be able to plug it in here. Okay, not all the time, but if we did 100% correct, it should be super easy to integrate. Because as you guys can remember, within MVVM architecture, the view model, and the model are three separate layers. Anything can be replaced at any time. Okay, but we are using spaghetti codes. This is not MVVM at all. It's just taking the values and setting it up. That's it. So you will see that this kind of pattern all over Flutter, Swift UI, and in Jetpack Compose as well. So this kind of pattern, when you look at it, it's easy. It's you know, you have something to change once only when the UI will be rendered, only if you have changed something. Okay, this is followed in Flutter, this is followed in Swift UI, and you can see clearly in Docker Compose as well. Only thing is, in Flutter we have to say set state. If you guys can remember, set state, and we have to assign the text. In here we have to say remember by mutable state of. In Swift UI, what we have to do is we have to use something called view iflet. Okay, that's it. It's basically simply the same thing in different form. Okay, remember these things. Only the view in Flutter. If you only call set state, it will call the build method. If you only have these text in remembered and mutable state, it will get rendered in Swift UI. As you will see, it only get rendered if you assign a value with iflet. That's simple. Okay, so we have this iOS application, but let me check the iOS application as well. What we need to do in order to change that. Obviously, now it's going to be failing because it's not the way we have left. Probably it will break for now. I think you guys can't see my screen with the iOS. Where's the Xcode? Okay, let me share it. Let me try to run it probably it will fail. No such shared, because the shared module is like completely broken by now, should be. But let me give it a try. Build fail. Let me go into Android and let me build it. I have to go to make project, and it is building. Probably the shared module for iOS. This one should fail. Even though it is built, let's go in here and try to run it. Yes, the shared module cannot be found. The main reason, as I assume, is that it is no longer valid with the code that we have done. Okay, we'll see how we can change these things. Okay, now it's saying asynchronous call occur in any property initializer. So same message that we have gotten. Okay, so in Swift UI you don't have something called suspend functions. We have async functions. Okay, we have to make sure we are like changing these things to asynchronous things. So we will look into this. Let's go how we can get these things fixed. So we have the iOS app now. Right now what we have is some scene where it's containing a view. We call this content view. We are used to seeing this. So what we will do is we will have something, some sort of NVVM pattern, kind of NVVM pattern for iOS. In this scenario, we will be using something called observable objects. Okay, so we'll be creating a view model. Let's see how we can work on that. We will be creating a view model. Okay, so obviously this is no longer coming as a asynchronous function. The greeting text won't work. We will create something called a view model in here. So we in order to create a view model, we can create directly within the class itself. Okay, in here we can create a Swift object and we can use it, but there is something more in um, Swift we can use. We call those things as extensions. Okay, so by extension we are simply like it. Don't get confused extension with what do you call inheritance. Okay, inheritance is something different than the extension. So what is the difference between extension and inheritance? So say for example we want to give some sort of a class. Let's say in this scenario the content view class. Okay, in content view structure we need to make it have some extra capabilities, extra functionalities. Okay, so we what we do is we can extend this content view struct in order to contain more values. So somebody can ask, okay, why can't we put everything in this struct then? It's the same thing, right? The struct that we are having, if you want to add more things, why don't we just add it in here? So the purpose of extension is something totally different than that. Extension can be applied to a code not within your grasp. So for example, a class that is coming from shared module, a class coming from Swift UI, you don't have the source code to it. It can be a third-party library. So anything that is there, but we need to add extra functionality on top of it, you can use extension. So yes, if you have the source like this, if you want to add something to the struct, you can obviously go here and add it. But to showcase the capability of Swift, we will just use the extension method. So I will be extending this content view. Oops. Command set extension view. Okay, so I can define any variables or anything like that, and out of the out of yes, this when we have these extensions, the content view. So we have defined the source code in here. We are saying simply, okay, we are extending the content view. Now, anywhere that we are referring this content view, whatever defined in here can be accessed. Okay, so in here, you can see that iOS app is having something called the content view. Okay, whatever we are defining here, we are defining in this extension. With this extension can be applied using or can be accessed using this content view. Let me show how what do you mean by that. So we within this content view, we will create something called view model. Okay, let's create a class called view model. View model, and it is going to be some type of observable object. Not observed object, observable object. Okay, so observable object, we can consider observable object as something like live data, sort of. Okay, so it has something called publishers, where it is like a unidirectional publication stream, or we can think it is as the equivalent of view model live data. So for example, we want to define a variable which will be used. We can simply say, okay, let's say we want a variable called text, and the initial value for this will be loading. Okay, loading. This is what we're going to be showing. But to make it observable, or we need to make sure these things will be, if somebody change this text in later on, or someone comes in and update this text, we need to stream this data to, or we need to say, okay, anyone who is listening to this text, anyone who is using this, they should be able to take that text and view. Okay, that means it should be it is like live data. When you are doing live data, you guys can clearly say that we will set value. It's the same thing. Whenever we are setting this value, it will get updated anywhere this is used. So to make it something like view data, something that is observable, we have to make it publishable. So we will say published in here. So right now what we have is a view model. It is a type of observable object. That means it is some sort of observable object that we will be using. That means only it is like when you are changing something, when we are changing with this view model, it will get notified. Okay, we will get more details like we are going along, but right now within the view, this is going to be the view, we will inject our view model. So how are we going to inject that? We have several ways. We can say private, or we can simply have a view model instance, but to make it singleton, we will say var view model. It's going to be type view model, and this view model will published values. So it's going to be observable object. So we have to annotate it as observed object. Observed object. That means this view model will have publishers. Okay, that means it will give some values in upcoming let's say in near future or in a stream. It will give, this view model will have observable values. So make sure you subscribe to that when you are listening to that. So we can simply say, okay, there is a view model, and within that view model, okay, we will find text. Did we published and text? Okay, view model for simple view model dot text. Okay, so there are two forms of that, view model dot text and dollar text. Okay, this is going to be the publish string, this is going to be the value string. We will look into that when we are moving towards MVVM architecture with Swift UI. But right now, the text, it will accept a stream, a publisher, or this raw value that we need. Okay, so in here, the preview section, which is this guy right around here, we will just comment it out. For now, it is not needed. We'll get back on that. So as you can see, as soon as I comment out the view, the preview, it's going to be gone. Right now, we are focusing on this. Let's see whether this works. Build failed, view model in call. Okay, in here we have to create a view model. So what we will do is we will do a view model, and I will call content view model. So that means we will have a view model for content view. You guys can see that this is not initialized. This is not initialized like we have to call view model. Okay, like this, we have not initialized. So what we have to do is we have to provide a view model. So in this scenario, what we'll do is content view model is needed, and the view model, it is going to get supplied. It's going to be within the content view, and content view have this extension view model. If you guys can see, the content view have a class called view model, make object out of it, and pass it along. So we have to make it as an object as well. So we have to call the parameters function. Content view model. Okay, there you go. So if you write, try to execute, build success. I'm not sure if you guys can see my simulator. Okay, I got stuck. Let me share my simulator as well. For now, I will go ahead with Chrome and Android Studio. I will just share these two. Okay, so initially now you guys can see with the iOS app, we'll go to the content view. Okay, and initially what we are saying is the text that we will be getting from the view model. Okay, in the view model, we will get a text, and whatever the text, and from you or okay. Okay, so it is showing something like that, but the text that we are supposed to get, it is still in the initial state. We are simply saying loading. and it is, since it is published one, we haven't updated this in any way. So what we can do is we can do something like this. Within init function, it is like the constructor. If we take in, so we can say text text equal beaker init. Okay, now we have to constructor like this. Okay, now let's see whether this is going to be changing. I'll run it once again. Yeah, you can see that initially it was loading. Now within the application execution, what I have done is I have changed the text to Randika. So what happens is, this is, since this is a publisher, it will notify, hey, earlier it was loading. Now the text is Randika. Whoever is listening to these view model changes for text, they will get notified. So this is the view model that we have created, and it has this loading publisher. That publisher will be assigned to it here, and it will change the text. Okay, so that's the main idea behind it. Now what we have to do is we have to make sure that we are getting the value from the API. Okay, now we have that greeting section that we have followed upon. We are gonna get values from there. So how we can do that? So we have the greeting, greeting, and we have the greet itself. Okay, so we will be getting two things around here. Okay, the first thing is the greeting itself, greeting, and we can get an error. Okay? The two things can happen. If you guys can remember, by calling the greeting, either it will, let's go back to an, okay. For now, just we will keep that in this way. So we will have two options. We will get the greeting or we will get the error. So what we can do is greeting. Okay, we have to call that object greeting and greet. All right, now what we will do is we will get the success or we will get the value. Now if you look at the greetings, I'm talking about this one, greeting dot or if you simply say text equals greeting. Okay, it should work, right? It is simply okay. This greeting, we are assigning it to the text. But the problem is the greeting value that we are getting can be there or cannot be there. The reason behind that is, in a case of error, if an error happens, the greeting is none. Okay, if error happens, the greeting is none. If greeting happens, the error is none. Okay, that the both way it can happen. So what we have to do is we have to null check. We have to null check this thing. We have to say, okay, if greeting is not null, then let put it as greeting. So we have to do that by using if-let commands. And we will just, to reduce confusion, I will just say G for simplicity, and I will say greeting. That means I am unwrapping. This is the greeting message that I am having. I am unwrapping that to G. So it is something similar to Kotlin let conditions. What I am doing is I am getting this greeting, and the greeting is only I'm unwrapping this if and only if there is a greeting message, it will be assigned to G. Okay, now I can say text.g. Okay, so simple enough. The reference of text in a closure, you can't just call it. We have to say self. That's because this is running in a callback kind of a situation. So you can't just say text, because if you say text in here, they are referring a variable within this scope. Okay, now we want to refer a text within the class scopes. That's why we have to say self.g, self.text equal to g. Okay, so let's run it. Let's see whether it is updating as we expected. Build succeeded. Yeah, you guys can see uh, uh, the value that we are getting, and last successful launch was from UOC. We'll just remove this. It's a little bit cloudy. Okay, let's run it again. It's gonna be running. Okay, you can see the things happening, but there is an error. Publishing changes from background text not allowed. To make sure, um, the publish value from the main thread via operations like receive on the model update. So this is complaining. Oh, I'm in dark. Let me get my backup on, or otherwise I'll just turn off my camera. Stop video. Yeah. There you go. You might not see some of the stuff that I am about to do. Wonder will change. So what we are warned about in here is that we are trying to change in the. Okay, I think you guys lost. Still, you guys can see Xcode or not?
We can see the Xcode, sir.
Okay. Okay. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to set the text value. Okay, this greeting, whatever we are trying to do is not within the main thread. Okay, we are trying to update something from background, because this is asynchronous task. This is a closure, what we are calling in Swift context. We don't call asynchronous task, we call those things closures. So whatever the value that we are getting for greeting, and we are updating something in the main thread. Okay, this view is rendering in the main thread. Now we are trying to access something within the main thread, and we are trying to update it. So it is not what do you call, not recommended that we do that. We don't have we have to like we can use the receive on model to update, but we will do a hacky way like we did in the coroutine stuff. So we have something called dispatch queue. Dispatch yes, dispatch queue, and we will say main. Okay, and we will call the dispatch main, and we will have something called async and whatever the code that we need to run. So we will put this everything in here. So it's simply saying, okay, whenever we get a greeting, just don't put it out there in a normal way. Use a dispatch queue. In this scenario, it's like running in the main thread. Okay, whatever you are trying to do, run it in the main thread in a asynchronous way. And if that greeting is there, you have to assign it to the text that we have, the text variable or text publisher that we are having here to be changed. So if I run it again, I should get the same result, but yes, after a few seconds. Okay, so you guys can see that I will remove this. It's two published, two publications. So it's a loading, and it says the value that we need to get. So simple enough. This is actually quite a little bit good, or a little bit better than what we have in Android. Okay, Android, we have the same thing, but in a different way. In iOS, by default or by using this method or by using KMM, it actually urges us. It is telling us to go with the MVVM model. Okay, but in Android we can just have something like this. But of course we can have this main dispatch queue in here as well. But we are not going to do that. But the reason is behind the view function that you find in here is more into like we can just dispatch queue and get everything, and we can do the if let everything in here. But we are doing in a good way, so we at least we know the MVVM architecture in Android. For iOS, it's a little bit, it's not complicated at all, but it is something little bit different. So I will have the view content as in here, content view model. Okay, the preview is back. So if I refresh and I will close my simulator, have more rooms in here. It stopped, not sure why. It is building. Okay, I'm running it the emulator. Let me close the emulator. I will stop it. I will go to content view. I will refresh. Yes, same thing. The preview is also working. I just have to give the view model in here. Okay, so the main idea behind is we have the asynchronous functionalities like we did in what we saw in iOS, Android. We have the same functionality, but the way of doing that in here we are using something called closure in closure or asynchronous tasks, but in Android we were using coroutines and coroutine scopes. So little bit same, little bit different, but you guys get the idea. It's going to be the same thing that we be achieving. Right now you guys can see we in Swift code we haven't write anything related to getting the details, getting the greeting message from outside world. Okay, we haven't introduced anything related to anything related to HTTP calls. We don't need to do that. We don't have to even, I mean, if you look at the greeting message in here, if I say greeting, okay, it is a string. They know it is a string. So you know the even the data type that we are expecting, it is matched. So whenever we are creating a multimodule section, and if you know the type, it will be converted to its Swift equivalent. Okay, Swift also have the string sections. It is converted to a string, so we don't have to worry about creating objects in Swift. It is automatically there for you. So if you go to the definition, it's not showing for some reason. Yeah, this is the generated code for you, code for the greeting message at least. So there are two things. One is the NS string and NS error. So you have the conversation from your end. You don't have to worry about this. And by the way, this is not Swift. This is directly to Objective-C. So when you are writing any code in KMM, it's not going to convert to Swift, because if you are converting to Swift, the Swift will convert then it again to Objective-C. So if you are using even though you are using Swift in here, the language itself, it's going to be converted to Objective-C. So rather than you convert two things, what Kotlin multimodule does is it convert everything into Objective-C. So in here, you can use Objective-C's Swift in parallel or in conjunction with each other. So that's that is something Swift provides. Swift actually can use Objective-C, and uh, you can use Swift and Objective-C in mix. If you put it in a separate code, that's up to you. And what we can do is we can include these things right away, and we can use it. So KMM does by converting everything to Objective-C, but in Swift, you can clearly read those things as Swift codes. So you don't have to worry about learning Objective-C or anything like that. It is compiled into you, and whatever you want to do in KMM will be compiled to Objective-C. Objective-C will be compiled into Swift when you're using Xcode. So the native experience is there. The values, whatever, if you are doing application for Swift UI, okay, or Swift perhaps, you can share this code, the greeting section. It is shared for both Android and iOS. So it makes sense. You don't have to worry about logical stuff. So this if you look at this in a high level view, this is only just the view. Okay, this is just only the view that we are interested in. Okay, this is the what we can call the view model, MVVM pattern. This is the view model, but we did not do it in Android, but in iOS we have separated into a view model. But the implication that here that you would see is we don't have any common code we don't have code that is specific to Swift, specific to Kotlin, but we have something in middle. What we can do, what we can share is there. The beauty of this is, let's say for example, we don't like we have something we have something like a library that is only available in Swift or Android. What we can do is you still have the option. You don't have to use this view model or content view. You can just skip the shared module. You can have your code in here. Anywhere relevant, you can use that. You can go with native support, no issues at all. Okay. So since this is completely isolated layers, the layers of the Swift UI as well as the Objective-C, Swift UI and the Kotlin multi-module, those are two separate sections. You don't have to worry about if you're not liking, if you're not having the capabilities, you just scrap it, use Swift UI. Okay, use Swift and you can do whatever you want. So for example, we don't have something supported in this MVVM or in this share code. Scrap it, take a Swift UI library and you can work on. No pressure. Okay, but the beauty comes in a project like this is when you can share code. Okay, you can share the code, you can share the logics. For Android and iOS, it's going to be the same. So you don't have to do the logic implementation twice. As an Android developer, you can say, okay, I don't know Kotlin or anything like that. You just do the logic implementation yourself. I just use it. Okay. So as an as an iOS developer, you will get more benefit because ultimately the Kotlin developer, the Android developer, they have to develop it in Kotlin. So any logic that is coming on, we can be on Kotlin. iOS developer just need to invoke that function and it will be there. So we have a lot of use cases like that. It's pretty much easy when you are working in a big project. You guys, we just need 2 Android developers and or maybe 1 Android developer. Anyhow, the Android developer is going to develop the logic. We as an iOS developer, you can just utilize the code. You can just invoke the view model or invoke this kind of shared code and you get the job done. So that's pretty much simple. Any questions with Swift UI code, guys? I'm sure that might be a little bit odd or something something not like super confident from your side because we are using Swift in here. There are Swift mechanisms, but obviously these are like something that you have seen in Kotlin, but they have different means. Okay, but ultimately the application itself, it's quite explanatory. Other than this extension method and these publishers and observable objects, think these things as view models. So it's easy. And we don't have dependency injection in here. You guys can see that I am directly creating objects right around here, and I'm using that. So there is no dependency injection at all, like Hill that we did in Android. But we have these things, but I haven't seen a lot of people using dependency injection in iOS or SwiftUI application. They just go for it. But I'm curious to learn how large projects are handling dependency injection in iOS. If I get an update, I will definitely share with you guys. Okay, anything else from what we have seen today? Okay, silence means nothing. Okay, I'll stop.